This is April 21st, 2024. Hello, my name is Magdalena Mikac, and I am a painter and a mixed media artist based in Zagreb, Croatia. I grew up in a village. It's called Privlaka on the outskirts of the city Zadar in southern Croatia on the Adriatic coast. If somebody wants to imagine it, it's mostly a Mediterranean surroundings. It was a very simple life. I did not have a lot of opportunity to see art, to experience art, especially not museum art. The only artist that I really heard of at a time was Picasso, because for people, Picasso's name meant art. So I was not really exposed up until I was significantly older to any kind of high quality art or museum art, however you want to put it. So, whatever references I did draw from my surroundings, I have drawn from nature. We had a large garden with a fairly lush flora surrounding us. I think this was a good learning experience for me as somebody who was a child interested in drawing, learning how to draw by following the lines that I saw in the nature surrounding me. Especially, I remember during the nighttime, the scenes would they would genuinely get pretty magical. I remember the fireflies and the stars in the sky and the atmosphere just being really, really beautiful. Nowadays, when I look back, it reminds me a little bit of Shakespeare, even. I don't know if that's overly dramatic to say, but I always think of Midsummer's Night Dream when I think back to that garden. So that is the kind of aesthetics that I now have in my work. It's something that has stayed with me. Another experience of my childhood that I would single out as pretty important for my work nowadays would be diving into the water. I grew up on the coastline. The sea was a big part of our life. So I would obviously spend a lot of time in the summer diving and swimming and whatnot. And this would mean that I would occasionally dive into the water that was completely dark. This was a very interesting experience for me when I was young because it was very surreal to be surrounded by all that darkness. It would usually happen when there was a shadow, maybe from a boat or a dock, casted onto the water. So when you dive in, the darkness would be complete and the way that your body would just be suspended in water. I felt as if I was diving into a subconscious mind. That's not how I would put it as when I was a child, of course, but it's how I see it now. So whenever in my work that you would notice a dark background and an image just kind of floating there, it is a reference to that. And it means that the scene is taking place in my inner world. For me, that sea is a metaphor for the subconscious mind, all in all. Another experience that I would single out would be seeing dust on sunlight, like this cascading dust. I just remember how I felt that it was remarkably beautiful. That idea of beauty or an experience of beauty has also stayed with me. It is something that has informed my work very much. My artistic roots are pretty much in those three experiences that I had in my childhood. As far as politics goes of the time, it was a very dramatic time in my early childhood. This was wartime in my country. It's hard now looking back saying if it impacted me or not. I think it was a time of deep emotional distress for the adults around me. As a child, I was less so affected by it, but I was aware of it. I think maybe later on you can connect the dots and see how maybe those emotions have stayed with you. Because I think that what informs my work now is a pretty deep emotional sense. At least that's how I see it. I don't know if it always translates, but that is the place from which I work nowadays. My biggest artistic influences, some of them have been with me since I was very young. I mentioned Picasso before. Picasso was inevitable for me as an influence because, like I said, he was the only name that was brought up when I was a child. And even in the matter of just seeing a reproduction of work, his was pretty much the only one that I've seen up until a certain age. Later on, I've discovered a myriad of artists that I now admire. There's a lot of art periods and artists that I am very fond of. I'm not sure if I would say that they necessarily influence my work, but I do appreciate them very much. From what I do see influencing my work is Monet, definitely. I remember seeing Monet for the first time as a student. We were visiting Paris. And to be honest, I was more so excited about seeing other kinds of work, but seeing the Impressionists in person, Monet was my favorite, but also seeing Renoir and Cezanne, I was very, very taken by it. I just thought that it was remarkable pieces of work. And Seeing how the work was centered around light and beauty, I would also add. That was very influential for me as a young artist, and it's something that has stayed with me up until now. As far as some random artists that I genuinely like, I would mention Matisse. I think Matisse just paints heavenly paintings. Has the most joyous feeling to his paintings, I would say, of all. I would add Bosch, Goya. There was a period when I was very taken by Gothic architecture, especially the Scrovegni Chapel, the starry vaults in Gothic architecture. That was very influential for me. Middle Eastern architecture, prehistoric art. As far as contemporary influences, I would single out Robert Rauschenberg. After getting to know his work, my art has taken a different route because I feel that the area in which he started to work, which is mixed media or combined collage, there was so much left unsaid in that. There was a great void left that he has opened up, a direction that he has opened up that made it possible for me to do the kind of work that I do today. There's very few artists that whose work I don't appreciate. Botticelli, I would also mention. There are some, especially female artists in the area of video art that I genuinely enjoy. Anna Mendieta, Mariko Mori, for example. What I also really appreciate is the drawing genius of, for example, Toulouse-Lautrec, Daumier. I really enjoy seeing these kind of works. I would say overall that what I enjoy the most is any kind of art that has a surreal quality to it, that has an odd quality or an otherworldly quality. That is something that I'm in general drawn to. It doesn't have to be odd, but just something that does not imitate reality in a sense. As of right now, there seems to be a reoccurring image of heaven in my paintings, and I think it is something that I will probably focus on in my further work. I have been mostly doing oil on canvases. I would like to get into mixed media collage again, or at least mixed media oil on canvas. That is probably the direction that I will be going into next. I would like to make a cohesive series of works surrounding the theme of heaven. A lot of it draws inspiration from Middle Eastern architecture and from the before mentioned works of Impressionists. The upcoming series of work, I would like it to focus on the color white, on light colors in general, maybe some portraits with a mixed media slash oil on canvas technique. That is something that I had my mind on for a while now. It would be nice to do maybe cohesive, nice 10 large scale pieces on canvas in this matter. It would be lovely to add some sculpture as well. I don't know if I'll have the opportunity to do that. But yes, overall, that is what I'm focusing on right now. I think the biggest challenge of being an artist is just being able to produce art in general. Art requires a certain kind of stability that a lot of people do not have. I know a lot of great artists, well, not a lot of, but I know several great artists who have had to give up their career because they simply did not have the backing that is necessary for them to produce art. Because sales can be very consistent, you need space, you need time, you need the finances to be able to pull it off. You need a significant amount of support or luck to be able to do this kind of work. Any kind of creative work, I think, can be very challenging in the long run. This is why it oftentimes becomes a hobby or not even that for a lot of people who I feel should have a future or a career in the visual arts, in the creative field in general. I have been lucky to have a husband who is very supportive and who makes it possible for me to focus on my work and is very helpful with also the producing of the content for social media, quality content and that I'm not sure I would be able to do just by myself. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of marketing that a lot of times artists are not very skilled at, that goes beyond just knowing how to paint, knowing how to sculpt, being creative. Nowadays, it can be challenging for just one person to be able to support themselves on art and make a living in it without sacrificing too much. What advice would I give to my younger self? Now, looking back, it's hard to say. I think I would, in general, give myself some life advice more so because what you do in your art and how you do in your art is always going to reflect your life and not the other way around. Maybe I would try and make sure I had the support necessary before. But either way, it's hard to look back and think about that. As far as trying unconventional media and techniques, I would say I did a certain amount of experimentation when I was younger. I nowadays mostly work in boring conventional media. I do mostly oil on canvas. I did some video art. During my college days, I would also burn stuff, put chemicals on stuff. I did those kind of experimentations. I don't know if I would call it unconventional because art has just moved forward so much that it's hard for me to say what's unconventional and what is not. It would have to be a pretty cutting edge piece of work for anybody to claim it as extremely unconventional nowadays after everything that we've seen so far in art history. I definitely never did any type of body work that I think could maybe be deemed shocking. I've seen some work that is a combination of body work and science that I felt had a shock factor to it. But this is not the kind of work that I've ever been involved in. It's just not something that comes naturally to me. I'm mostly a traditional artist. Like mixed media collage and video art for me is probably the farthest that I would go. Even though I'm always open to trying new materials, new techniques. Usually when I work, I'll have some kind of music playing. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in, what type of work it is. If it's something fairly repetitive, such as painting the background, I might even have a podcast on because I don't really need that much concentration. If I need to focus, I will usually have some kind of instrumental music playing. I'm fairly random with how I pick it. If I'm in a rush, I might listen to some pop. And if I need to focus, really deep dive into it, I'll usually have just something instrumental. Silence is okay too, but the problem is that it depends on where you are. If I would be in a surroundings that would be devoid of any unnecessary noise, anything distracting, then I could work in silence. But for the most part, I like to have some music on just so that nothing really distracts me other than that and I can focus. The best reaction a person can have to a painting is, I would say, just looking at it with a lot of focus. You can always tell when a person has a genuine reaction because essentially paintings or works of art in general are made to be looked at. So whenever I see somebody who seems taken by the work and is really staring at it, and you can just tell that the painting has an impact on them, that is, I think, a very high compliment. That is how I would approach a work of art that I really liked. Of course, it's always nice when a person says something nice to you. But at the end of the day, it's not really about you as an artist. It's about the relationship between the audience, the person looking at a piece of art, and the piece of art itself. This is something that I can never really experience as an artist. I have a different relationship to it. I'm too close, in a sense, to it. My relationship to it is complicated by the fact that I make art. So I can never truly comprehend how somebody who is not in this profession would look at it. But to me, that always seems like a very honest moment in between a person looking and a piece of art. What do I hope people take away from my artwork? That's a difficult question for me to answer because when I make art, it's not something that I necessarily think about. I make something because there is an internal impulse to do it. And then I just leave it at the mercy of the world, really. I think what I would hope people would get from it is some beauty. Beauty is important for me in my work. It is something that I strive towards. And I think beauty can be quite healing for people. So maybe some beauty and maybe an opportunity to step into a world, so to speak, that is not their own, to step into an experience of a different person. I don't know if this is something that will be valuable to them. It is something that I find interesting when I approach other people's work, when I'm confronted with a piece of art that I enjoy. To me, in a sense, I feel like I have stepped into a different realm, a different reality almost, as if I can almost enter somebody's inner world. So in a sense, that is a fascinating experience for me, and it is something that I enjoy when I look at art. It is an escape. That's a very conventional way to put it, but in a sense, it is an escape from the reality we live in. So maybe that, but whatever it is that people get from it, if it's valuable to them, I would appreciate that. That would be then meaningful to me as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to do this interview and for showing my work to the broader audience. You can find me in most social media. On Instagram, I am under the name magdalena.mikac.art. You can also visit my webpage, magdalenamikac.com, and can also find me under that name on TikTok and Facebook and Pinterest actually as well. Other than that, so far no new exhibitions are planned, but if you're interested, you can stay tuned on my social media and I will be posting any kind of news and any new work that I produce on there. Also, I would like to say thank you to Stan for giving me the opportunity to give this interview once again. I hope everyone who has listened to it has enjoyed it.